Shadows of the Galaxy, the long-awaited second set to Star Wars Unlimited, is here at last, and just like we did in Spark of Rebellion, we're going to have a video right here going over a bunch of rules questions that I've seen commonly asked both before and after the release of the set. So hopefully we're going to answer some rules questions you might have. We're going to go over 9 rules questions, including all of the keywords and some of the rules changes that have occurred to the game, little minor rule adjustments that happened with the release of Shadows of the Galaxy, and then some different interactions that I know people have questions about that I've seen you asking about. So if you're here for some Star Wars Unlimited rules stuff, dig in. We've got a jam-packed video for you. Let's jump into it. What's up, everyone? It's Dan with Main Deck here with another list of rules questions for you for Star Wars Unlimited TCG. And this is going to be a very thick one. We've got 9 different sections to go through, so I'm not going to waste any more time. We're just going to jump right into these rules questions. These are commonly asked rules questions from all over the internet that I've seen, I've studied, made sure we got the right answers for. So if you have any further questions about any of these rules questions or new ones you want me to answer, leave a comment down below. I will get the correct answer for you with rules references where possible. All right, so the first thing we're starting off with is a small but very important rules adjustment that happened with Shadows of the Galaxy, and that is how leaders work when they are being deployed or when they are being defeated or otherwise leaving play once they've been made into units. So this is a change that came with the comprehensive rules to the game. Prior to this rules update, the way it worked was that leaders were always in play, whether they were in a particular arena or in the base zone, which is where they started. They just simply moved from one to the other. They never left or entered play. The way that it works now is just a small adjustment, but it does have some impact in the game, which is that when a leader is deployed, it simultaneously leaves play from the base zone and enters play into the arena it is entering into. And when it is defeated, for example, from that arena that it's in as a unit, it is simultaneously leaving play from that arena and entering play back into the base zone exhausted once again. So really, for a lot of intents and purposes, there isn't a change to what's going on because the adjustment is simultaneous. You are both leaving and entering play at the same time. There's no fragment of time where your leader is not in play. But what this does mean is that there are certain effects in the game that this kind of intuitively felt like it should work with before, but it didn't, and now it does. And namely, those two are Boba Fett. 2 different forms of Boba Fett. In fact, we have Boba Fett Disintegrator, the legendary unit that says if he attacks an exhausted unit that did not enter play this turn, then he is able to deal free 3 damage to it. Previously, that would work on any leader that was exhausted, even if it just entered play that turn, because it had been in play since the start of the game for multiple turns at that point. Now that leader does enter play that turn. If it attacks, it is not subject to getting spiked by Boba Fett's extra damage there, which is a small nerf, but it's a relevant one to Boba Fett Disintegrator. That's why that card was another reason that card was so strong. The other changes in Boba Fett collecting the bounty, which has a couple of effects that state that when an enemy unit leaves play, you're able to ready resources. Previously, if you defeated your opponent's leader, you didn't get to use either side of Boba Fett in order to ready resources because that unit didn't leave play, it stayed in play. Now it leaves play and then re-enters simultaneously back into the base zone. So this is really just a change that was made because this is how so many players who were learning the game thought that it worked intuitively, and these are literally the only 2 cards that it affects from Spark of Rebellion. So just some small adjustments with that to some of the design going forward, and there you go. Now it all works. Minor buff to Boba Fett, not that he really needed it, but just minor little buff to Boba Fett leader, and then a minor nerf as well to Disintegrator, but that is an important rule that you need to understand. Now, one of the big things to know is that this does not trigger when played effects or when you play a unit or when you play a card. The leader is still being deployed, it just enters play. And we're going to have a few rules on this list today where it's really good to understand the difference between playing, which is to pay the cost, take the card from your hand, play it, or from another zone if it's through an effect, and play it, and entering play, which lots of things can enter play without being played. And we're going to go over a few more later on this video, but keep those 2 in mind because when an effect says when played, it never triggers off of something specifically entering play, only when it is actually itself played. So that rules for you. You've got to understand how these leaders work now. It's a very small adjustment, but hopefully one that you can pick up real quick. And then watch out for your local Boba Fett players now. Now we're going to go through the new mechanics from Shadows of the Galaxy and just make sure you do understand the few little rules quirks associated with those. First of all, we're going to talk about smuggle. Smuggle is an exciting new keyword that actually allows you to play cards from your resources. Smuggle is listed on the cards, and when you put the card face down in your resource zone, now later in the game, you are able to pay that smuggle cost to play it out of your resources. It's important to note that your resources have always been open information to you, but not open information to your opponent. That has always been the case, so you've always been able to look at your resources. I've seen that question asked quite a bit. Take a peek at them, see which ones you want to, for example, with Han Solo, the ones you want to defeat for his effects. Now you get to look at them and say, ooh, which smuggle effects do I have in here? Because when a card has smuggle and it's in your resource zone, you can pay the cost in order to smuggle it out and play it. Now, there are a couple things to note about this. Smuggle costs do have aspects that are sometimes different than the aspects on the card. You'll see, look here on the card that I have displayed, you'll see some aspect icons there. Now you have to meet the aspect icons to pay that cost. For example, if you're playing this Hotshot Blaster in a red deck, but you don't have access to the yellow aspect, then you are still going to have to pay the aspect penalty if you want to smuggle this into play, and vice versa. If you're playing it in a yellow deck that doesn't have access to red, you can smuggle it for its normal smuggle cost, but if you want to play it from your hand, you're going to pay the aspect penalty. So keep in mind that those are basically two completely separate costs depending on which zone it's in. Now, smuggle costs usually cost more, but the cool thing is that you can actually exhaust the card you are smuggling to play. So if this Hotshot Blaster is in your resources, you can exhaust the Hotshot Blaster to pay for one of the smuggle costs to play the Hotshot Blaster out of your resources. That is super clutch and makes smuggle a lot easier to use. Also, after you are done taking the card out of your resources, paying the cost, then you're going to take the top card of your deck and put it exhausted into your resources face down, of course. So when you play the card with smuggle, you even get to replace the resource right away. Now that replacement happens immediately. It is a part of playing the sort of modified play action with smuggle. So it is something that is going to happen basically simultaneously. It's very, very similar to the leader ruling we just discussed. The card leaves your resources and simultaneously a card enters from the top of your deck into your resources exhausted. So it will be there if there are other effects, which we'll go through shortly, that are going to be relevant for that. So you do immediately do that, and then you go ahead and resolve the card that you are playing with smuggle. So that is, those are some of the little bits of smuggle. We will have some more discussion on some smuggle quirks a little bit later in this video, but that is the basics of how to become an expert smuggler. Now, capturing is another new mechanic. This actually comes with a bunch of different keywords that you're going to want to be aware of. We have capture, we have guarding, and we have rescue. These are all effects that all kind of circle around this capture ability. Capturing just means taking something in play, taking a unit in play and putting it face down underneath another unit. You are going to basically take it off the field. It is going to leave play when that happens. You're going to put it face down underneath the unit that's capturing it, and you'll see the effect like right here. We'll explain exactly what to capture under and what you were able to capture this. All these capture effects, by the way, are worded to capture your opponent's things. There is no current way to capture your own stuff under your stuff with a card effect. And when that happens, as that unit is leaving play and going face down underneath your unit, you are going to also defeat any upgrades currently on it and remove any damage counters on the captured unit. Now, the captured unit is face down under a unit which is now considered guarding that unit, and there are card effects that will be able to rescue that unit from capture. When a unit becomes rescued, you pull it out from underneath the unit guarding it, you flip it back face up, and you put it under its owner's control exhausted. Now that is going to be very important because there are going to be some quirks that can happen. I've seen these already happen in even pre-release games where units can be captured. Your unit may be captured under your opponent's unit, and then you might use an effect to gain control of the opponent's guarding unit. So now you have a unit in your possession who has captured a unit that you own. In that case, nothing happens. You don't get to freely rescue that unit. If that unit dies, it will still go back to its owner's control, so in this case, probably you. So capture can really be thought of as sort of a temporary way of removing something from the board. It's very easy actually to get your capture unit back. All you have to do is defeat the unit that is currently guarding your captured unit, but there are also a bunch of card effects that will just straight like rescue units for you so that you can get them right back that way. One very small rules quirk to note is that while that unit is face down underneath its guarding unit, the face down unit is still public information. Unlike resources, either player may know what that card is if they happen to forget what got captured under what later on, maybe from a big card like Finalizer that just captured a ton of things and it gets a little confusing. Both players are free to look at the face down card at any point. This isn't a memory game to try and remember what captured what. Now, this part is very important with capturing. The units, once again, are going to leave play when they're captured, and when they are rescued, they are going to enter play, again, exhausted. Keep that in mind, but just like leaders, this is not going to trigger when played abilities on the unit as it's rescued. Also, any previous upgrades that were defeated or damage counters or shield counters or anything on the unit do not go back on it when it is rescued. But just like we talked about earlier with those Boba Fett examples, they are still considered to be entering and leaving play for any effects that are looking for specifically entering or leaving play, just not when played or when you play a blank abilities. Finally, let's talk about bounties. This mechanic had definitely confused a few new people because it's one of those weird mechanics that's actually a drawback on the units that it's printed on, or otherwise it's on upgrades that you want to actually play on your opponent's stuff. A bounty is like a negative effect that is on a unit that says when this unit is defeated or captured, an opponent gets to claim that bounty and get the effect. So you might have a very strong unit for its cost, like Dr. Evazan here, who's a 3/3 with shielded for just 2, which is a pretty crazy stat line, but he's also got a pretty crazy bounty, which is when your opponent does defeat him, they're going to get to ready up to 12 resources, which is just wild. So you have to be very careful with these units because you're risking getting a more powerful unit with the fact that if it's defeated, your opponent's going to get a nice effect in return. You may instead want to play these cards that are upgrades that are going to put bounties onto units. Now, you can certainly put them on your own units if you want to. I don't know why you would want to do that, because then your opponent's just going to get an extra ability when they defeat them. Instead, you want to play these upgrades onto your opponent's units, and that means that when you go ahead and defeat or capture those units, you are going to get to claim that bounty and get that extra effect. So it's kind of like a delayed special effect that says, I'm only going to get this once I can take out this one particular thing right here. Now, there's an interesting rules quirk with bounties in Twin Suns or multiplayer formats that you need to be aware of. Now, normally in a 2-player game, it's pretty simple. If your opponent has something with a bounty on it, you defeat that unit, you get to claim that bounty. You may actually wonder what happens if you defeat your own unit with a bounty in a 2-player game. If you have a unit with a bounty on it and you defeat it through an effect like Emperor Palpatine, then your opponent still gets to claim that bounty even if you're the one who defeated your own unit. It's always an opponent who claims the bounty, not yourself. Now, when we get into a multiplayer game like a Twin Suns game with multiple opponents, well, who gets to claim the bounty when something's defeated? There's a tweak to the rules that says if an opponent in a multiplayer game defeats something with a bounty, that specific opponent is the one who gets to claim the bounty. So that's pretty simple. That makes sense. If I defeat something, I get to claim the bounty on it. However, what happens if you defeat your own unit with a bounty in a multiplayer game? Who gets to claim the bounty then? It's still not you, unfortunately. If you go ahead and sacrifice your Dr. Evazan to your Emperor Palpatine, then in this multiplayer game, you're going to choose any one of your presumably 3 opponents who gets to now ready a bunch of resources. That actually is kind of a cool little tool that you can take advantage of if you want to in a fun Twin Suns deck where you can go ahead and pick a favorite and say, you know what? You and I, we're going to be friends now. I'm going to go ahead and sacrifice my Dr. Evazan so you get to ready all of your resources right now. Let's win this game together. So some interesting politics I think you can play there, but it's important just to know about the little quirks about how bounty works in a normal game and, of course, in a multiplayer game. All right, now let's get into the more specific rules quirks. We're going to talk about Hondo Ohnaka, everybody's favorite smuggler and everyone's favorite smuggle card, Timely Intervention. These are 2 extremely good cards that right when Hondo was revealed, there was some confusion exactly about in what order things worked. And in fact, I had a whole video that we did in Spark of Rebellion on nested abilities and nested actions that was trying to make sense of all this for everybody. Now, Hondo Ohnaka has an ability that says when you play a card using Smuggle, you get to exhaust him to put an experience counter on a unit. Timely Intervention allows you to smuggle it if you want to, and then when you do, you get to play a unit and give it ambush that phase. Now, the thing you obviously often want to do is put the experience counter on the unit that you're about to ambush with. But the question was this something we can do? And then the easiest way is just break this down into exactly what's going on. So we are going to take our action for the turn to smuggle a Timely Intervention. When we start smuggling Timely Intervention, that is going to trigger Hondo, which says when you play a card of Smuggle, you put an experience counter on something. Now, as we are resolving a card effect, we can't interrupt the resolution of that card effect to resolve our triggered ability, so it's just going to be pending. It's going to wait for its next opportunity to resolve. We're going to resolve the Timely Intervention right here by putting a unit into play. Let's say we're going to put Hondo's good old pal Ezra Bridger into play. Off aspect, doesn't matter. Let's just say for fun, we're going to put Ezra Bridger into play, and we are going to put our Ezra into play, and he'll gain ambush from the Timely Intervention. As Ezra is played from the Timely Intervention, we finally will hit our first opportunity to resolve any of our triggered effects. And when this happens, we note that we have Hondo's ability pending to resolve, and we have an ambush when played ability given by Timely Intervention that is now pending to resolve as well. Because at no point was a triggered ability triggered during the resolution of a triggered ability. Instead, one triggered ability triggered from the playing of the card with Smuggle and the other triggered from the playing of the unit with Timely Intervention. Those are all considered to be one compressed action during which those abilities both triggered, and thus they are simultaneous abilities, and the player who is playing the Ezra Bridger with the Hondo Ohnaka deck for some reason gets to choose the order in which those simultaneous abilities resolve. Likely, they will want to use Hondo first, put the experience counter on Ezra, and then resolve Ezra's ambush ability, making sure he can stay alive so he can get his when he completes an attack ability as well. But I mean, maybe they don't want to. Maybe they want to ambush first and then put an experience counter on something afterwards because of some other interaction. It is completely that player's choice, however they want to resolve that. Now, this all sounds pretty complicated, to be honest, and it did take me a little while just to try and figure out the most concise way to explain this. But if you really want to just get the breakdown again, all you ever have to do is think, if you know what a triggered ability is, which is something that says a timing of when it's going to occur, a colon, and then the ability. If a triggered ability resolves and that causes another triggered ability to resolve, that nests. And when that happens, you resolve the newest ability first. Otherwise, if you just have a single game event that is causing multiple different things to trigger, even if they are at different points in that event, for example, Hondo's Smuggle trigger, and then the Ezra entering play both feel like different points, that is all just smushed together into one game action, and you, the active player, get to choose the order in which those resolve. Now, the world of actions wasn't left alone either. Our next rules quirk is going to be looking at Lando, the new Lando Calrissian leader, and the Smuggle ability. But specifically what we're going to be talking about here is a new concept called modified actions. And this is another element that sort of replaced the nested action thing from the previous version of the comp rules. Instead, now we have defined a modified action as a card ability of some kind that allows you to take an action in the game, but with some sort of modification. That modification may be very simple things, like when you attack with a unit, you get to give it an ability or plus damage or something. Basically, anytime you're resolving a card effect that says to do an action, which is to play a card, attack with a unit as the most common ones, or use an action ability of some kind, then that ability may list certain modifiers for that action, and those become part and parcel of resolving that action, and they're going to happen before any triggered abilities from that action. In the last set, we were looking at Admiral Ozzel, and we were wondering, when do you get to choose what unit your opponent is going to get to ready? Now we understand Admiral Ozzel means you are going to ready something and your opponent is also going to immediately ready something. Then you will go ahead and resolve any abilities that triggered during the play of this modified action. So in set 2, we're going to look at Lando Calrissian, who has an action that will modify playing a card with Smuggle. It modifies in a couple ways. It makes it cost 2 less, which is pretty simple to understand when that happens. It also says you defeat a resource that you own and control. And the question has been, when do you get to choose the resource that you're going to defeat? Do you have to do that before or after completing the card ability? Now, we'll see if you can guess this based on what I've said already, but the correct way to resolve Lando is as follows. You are going to exhaust Lando. You are then going to choose a card in your resources with Smuggle. It does have to already have Smuggle, by the way. Some people think that will let you smuggle anything into play, but that's not what Lando does. You choose a card with Smuggle in your resources. You pay the cost. Then you take it out of your resources, put it into play or into the discard pile in the case of an event, and at the same time take the top card of your deck and place it exhausted into your resources, which is part of resolving the Smuggle itself. Then you will choose a resource you control and defeat it, which might be the resource you just put into play with Smuggle. Now you have completed the modified action with Lando, and you resolve either the effect of the event that you played from Smuggle or any when played abilities that occurred when you played the unit with Smuggle. So once again, you will always completely finish the modified action, do everything that the modified action says, and then you will move on and do any effects of the card that you played. And in the case of a modified attack action, it is the same as it was before, where we have certain timings during the attack, which are going to be on attack, completes an attack, and defeated triggers. Those are still going to resolve at the appropriate timing points during the attack. That doesn't change at all, but the cards will always be worded in a way where it should be fairly intuitive when the modifications take place during the attack sequence. So once again, the big thing to take away there is when a card effect instructs you to take some sort of action and has modifiers to it, you are going to resolve everything basically written on that card effect, and then you'll resolve whatever you played with it or whatever you attacked with. Now, next we have a card that has been spooking a lot of people, which makes sense given its name. It is the TIE Phantom. The TIE Phantom is a new card from Shadows of the Galaxy that if you don't read the commas right, you're going to think it's a lot stronger than it actually is. That said, this thing kind of destroyed me last week at local, so it is still an extremely good card. TIE Phantom has a really cool ability that says it cannot be damaged, defeated, or captured by card abilities, which makes it a very, very potent card, very hard to deal with. But some people are reading this wrong, and they think it says that it cannot be damaged and it can't be defeated or captured by card abilities. Basically, they're thinking it reads that nothing can damage it and card abilities can't defeat it or capture it. That is not exactly what it says. It says it can't be damaged by card abilities, defeated by card abilities, or captured by card abilities. So the easiest way to defeat an opponent's TIE Phantom is to simply attack it, because an attack is not a card ability. Remember, a card ability is card text. Text on a card is what constitutes a card ability. If the card ability doesn't directly do any of those three things, then it is going to be able to perfectly normally affect the TIE Phantom. For example, Make an Opening is another card that is a great answer to TIE Phantom, because giving it -2/-2 will reduce its stats to 0, yes, but that does not... The effect of Make an Opening does not directly defeat the TIE Phantom, and it doesn't capture it, and it doesn't damage it, meaning that TIE Phantom is simply going to be still subject to the regular rules of when a unit's HP is reduced to 0 or is modified to 0. When that happens, the unit is defeated by a game rule, not by a card effect. So using Make an Opening or attacking a TIE Phantom, both ways to take care of it. Now, here's a way that you will not successfully take care of a TIE Phantom. Do not attempt to use Power of the Dark Side while your opponent has a TIE Phantom in play, which allows your opponent to choose a unit, and then Power of the Dark Side will defeat that unit. They can freely choose their TIE Phantom. Power of the Dark Side will then attempt to defeat the TIE Phantom, but will fail because TIE Phantom cannot be defeated by card abilities. All that said, TIE Phantom, still very scary. Try to respect it. Hold some cards that can ambush it, for example. Be ready to take it out, because once that thing starts getting experience counters on it, then it starts becoming a real problem for you. And that's from personal experience. Now, I've seen this come up a lot, which makes sense because this is right out of the starter decks. The Mandalorian himself, along with shields and experience counters. The question is, can I exhaust something when I play a unit with shielded or use an effect like Wing Leader to put experience counters on something? And the answer is no. The Mandalorian triggers when you play an upgrade. And the effects like Shielded and effects like Wing Leader, they will give upgrade tokens to units, but giving is not playing. Remember, card games are very specific. If a card says played, it will only trigger when something is played, which again, as we mentioned earlier, means taking the card out of your hand or another zone in the case of like Smuggle, and then paying the cost and playing it with the play action. So it's pretty simple to trigger Mandalorian. You do have to take a play action to put an upgrade into play, not get that upgrade from some card ability that is simply going to give it to it, unless that card ability allows you to play that upgrade through some sort of modified action. Certainly, then that will work. Just watch out for if it says play or if it is just something that is going to enter play. Similar, once again, to our discussion from the leaders right from the beginning of the video. Finally, number 9, our last thing we're going to discuss today is Krayt Dragon and Change of Heart. Krayt Dragon, of course, the big bad, the big nasty dragon from the set that has got a lot of people very, very frightened of this monster. And, you know, for good reason, because once this thing gets into play, it can be very, very tough to overcome. Now, some enterprising players thought, here's an interesting idea. What happens if I play a card like Change of Heart to take control of my opponent's Krayt Dragon? Now, Krayt Dragon's ability triggers when anything is played by your opponent, and then it will allow them to deal damage equal to the cost of that played thing to something else. But Change of Heart is going to take control of the Krayt Dragon. Who then gets to deal the damage, and to what is the question that comes up. And thankfully for you all, I have a very definitive answer for you. So let's discuss exactly how a when played ability triggers and resolves. Now, when a when played ability triggers and resolves, those are actually 2 different timings. If you didn't get that already through that complicated discussion earlier, triggering timing is a certain event when something will cause something else to happen, but sometimes you have to make the resolution of those triggered abilities pend and wait for another time point. For example, you cannot resolve a triggered ability while you are resolving an event that is played. The event has to take effect first. You have to use all of its abilities. Then when it's completed, you can resolve any triggered abilities. Just like we talked about with Hondo Naka and the timely intervention earlier, his ability would pend and wait until the event has fully played. Then you can go ahead and resolve anything. So when we play the Change of Heart will trigger immediately. Then the Change of Heart will resolve, and that then is very important. The Change of Heart can resolve, take control of the Krayt Dragon. Once it is finished resolving, now we will resolve any pending abilities, which means the Krayt Dragon's ability will now resolve. But the Krayt Dragon is under, for example, my control now. If I'm the one who played the Change of Heart, I now control the Krayt Dragon. So who controls the Krayt Dragon's trigger? Well, the trigger doesn't care what happens to the unit after it is triggered. The unit, in fact, can be defeated, and the triggered ability will still go off. We've seen that plenty of times in Spark of Rebellion already. So, does it care if the opponent has control of the Krayt Dragon now? It certainly doesn't. The controller of the Krayt Dragon, when the Krayt Dragon triggered, is the one who still controls the Krayt Dragon's trigger. Even if the Krayt Dragon has changed sides, that player who originally controlled them before the Change of Heart resolved is still going to choose any unit or base to deal the 6 damage to from the Change of Heart. But absolutely, the player playing the Change of Heart does not also gain control of the Krayt Dragon's trigger. And that is because when that Change of Heart is played and when that Krayt Dragon triggers is before the Change of Heart resolves. So the trigger is going to stick with the original controller of the Krayt Dragon. All right. That was a lot of rules, and I am sure there will be some questions. I'm going to do my best to edit this down and try and make it as digestible as possible. But if you all have questions about anything we discussed today, or if there are other burning Shadows of the Galaxy or Spark of Rebellion rules questions that you still have, feel free to leave a question down in the comments below. Let me know as soon as I'm able to. I will get to your questions. I will answer them to the best of my ability, give you rule citations where appropriate, and try and explain everything in the most effective way possible so that you can have a better understanding of the game. I'm happy to try and help you all out as much as I can. And I packed everything in this, so hopefully we don't have to do more of these rules videos this time. But if there are a lot of very common questions, you know, I'll be happy to put another rules video out for you all. I hope you guys enjoyed that one. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're enjoying Shadows of the Galaxy. It is a very fun set that I am enjoying as well. We'll have some more content for Star Wars Unlimited coming to you very soon, so make sure you stay tuned. Give the video a like if this helped you out, and if you enjoy your Star Wars Unlimited content, and of course subscribe to the channel if you want to catch more of it. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you in the next one.